Hello everyone, and welcome to the Author Interaction 18.0 in our Story Behind the Story series. Today we welcome Abeer Kapoor. In fact, he's recently featured in India Today Coffee Table Book as one of the several young Indians who will shape the India of tomorrow. I am Neeta, Aneja, and I'm the founder of Trends. This is a platform for art, cultural, social, and literary experiences. And with me is my co-host Shreya Aneja. In fact, she's a budding architect, she's a spoken word poetess, and also a writer. So today we have our 18th interaction. Next we have Tavleen Singh on 10th of November with her latest book, Messiah Modi. So to briefly introduce Abeer, Abeer is the author and he's also a game designer and a journalist with an experience of over 5 years. In fact, he's written in all the reputed publications, including Hardnews. He's the author of the Most Notorious JailBreakers by Rupa Publications. This book is an anthology of stories of escape from Indian prisons. Incidentally, the book has recently been acquired by T-Series to be adapted into a TV show. He's also the author and creator of Zoraver and the Lost Gods. In fact, that is a graphic novel to be released in 2021-22. Besides being the author, he is in fact the creator, as you all know, of the very famous and much acclaimed election game, the poll. So Abeer, welcome to our forum. It's such a pleasure to welcome you today. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll really start with my questions straight away. This is basically a conversation round. For those of you who are coming to our platform for the first time, so initially Shreya and me will be conversating with Abeer, and then we'll have an interactive round. In fact, for everyone, I must say there are books to be won by Abeer, and please be with us till the end of this session. Abeer, in your book, The Most Notorious JailBreakers, you have dwelt into the dark underbelly of countries' prisons and documented the 16 most audacious jailbreaks. First of all, we know that you're also a crime reporter. So I'm sure that was a motivation and a big help for you. So how did it help you to write this book, this anthology?
So I would like to start off by, of course, thanking Rupa for giving me this opportunity to write this book. The idea actually came from the publishing house, and they were saying that they wanted a book to be written about jailbreaks, and it found its way to me, and I seized the opportunity. I love crime, even say my master's thesis that I did at Azim Premji under my professor Vishnu Pad, who is one of the people who are attending. It was on looking at colonial detective fiction in Bengal, which he guided me through, and it was something that really brought me close to realizing how important crime is in a way that it shapes the history of India, shapes who we are. It is a reaction to um, order. It is a reaction to the way laws are set. So what you actually see, even in my book, is that the bulk of crimes that are there, from say Sobraj to Natwarlal to Walcott to a variety of people, are people who are reacting to the heavy clampdown on on trade, on our sort of um, what you may call it a closed economy, and these are all smugglers that are getting caught. So it helped me understand the beauty of looking at the history of India. It taught me that the crime and criminality is really interesting. Just give me
Yeah.
a mute.
Can you unmute? Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. So I realized that it's this like one narrative that cuts across the country, and but also when we started looking at the escapes, you understand how porous the jails are. That like there is always, as Natwar Lal said, that he will always escape from prison as long as there is a corrupt police officer. officer, and there is rampant corruption that you find in this book. So we gave the book to the Brazilian ambassador, whose wife read it, and she wrote back saying that the what is very apparent is that there was always inside help in all of these escapes. So that was super fascinating.
I'm sure. That sounds super interesting. And I'm sure all of the viewers who've not read the book will immediately go to the Amazon. It is available, right, Abeer?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, it's available on Flipkart, but also in this time, please, I know how difficult it is to step out, but also promote and support your local bookstores. They are the ones who are weathering the pandemic, and as we realize that books are an essential part of the frontline service. So support your local bookstore, and that is absolutely necessary.
That is amazing. That's a wonderful message. And I personally feel that is how it should be done because we need to support all these small businesses in pandemic, definitely. So, Abhi, when you first started to write this book, were you playing to the gallery? I know Rupert suggested and everything, but you know how it is when you're writing a first book, you always want to write something which is, very important and, people really read more. So, how was it? I mean, was it because you would like to garner a big audience because of the topic, or was it simply because it was of your personal interest that you started to pursue this subject? I mean, leave
So as
aside
a,
what was suggested.
so as I said, that I've always been fascinated in crime and the
Yes.
way crime has come to represent a certain type of behavior, a certain type of history, a certain type of reaction to law. But what you also realize is that most of these chapters do end up writing themselves. Like,
Mm.
for example, the chapter on Geeta Parmar, though it's short, is fascinating. And all these little facts do tell their own story. So I don't know if you guys know about this, but Geeta Parmar was a criminal and she was called the Queen of Baikula. Now, when she was in jail, she organized a tiny mafia that was preventing people from entering toilets, to the extent that even one of Dawood Ibrahim's right hand man, Chota Shakil's girlfriend, was also living in her terror. So when she escapes, she's being escorted from one prison to another because wherever she's taken, she turns out to be a terror, and she karate chops the guards who are taking her, and she runs away to her child. So how does the story not write itself? So
Absolutely.
a lot of these stories just end up being these things that you're just observing through reading, writing, meeting people, and they just end up pouring out of you.
Great. Amazing. So I know all the 16 stories that we have talked about and you have talked about rather, and I've read. I mean, I've liked all of them, but what is your personal favorite? I mean, which story will you really pick up and say that, fine, this is what I really wanted to write about and I'm writing?
So there are two. There are two for me. One is the story of Daniel Haley Walcott. He,
Okay.
for me, represents someone I want to be when I grow up, and I've been saying this for years. Um, he was a buccaneer. He was someone who was um, just leading this exciting life that represents. So, what else you find is that some of these stories have these wonderful characters who are so representative of their time. So, in the Mir Layak Ali story, you encounter a man called Sidney Cotton, and in Daniel Walcott's story, you encounter Daniel Walcott. So so he dies at the age of about 78 in 2001 in a cocaine deal gone wrong. And the LA Times runs this tiny little brief about the 78-year-old man who dies. And a week later, there's this story that appears, which is a double page spread by the journalist whose name I'm forgetting, but he wrote a wonderful story called "Will the Real Daniel Haley Walcott Please Stand Up?" And it is this story that cuts across continents, cuts across decades, about this man who's just out there to dupe everyone and anyone. He's a Gatsby-esque figure. He marries into privilege. He gets a plane. He promises to sell it to the government of India to fight the Chinese scourge. He's caught tiptoeing at the border, trying to escape to Pakistan, where he finally does, holds a press conference. There's an effigy of his which is burnt in Beirut. So this gentleman is larger than life, and he's phenomenal. The other person that and the other chapter that I thoroughly enjoyed writing was about Sukur Narayan Bhakia. So now Sukur Narayan Bhakhia is this smuggler, and he runs everything from Daman and Diu to Goa to all of these places. And the way he commits crimes are so specific to that moment, where you also realize that this is part of something so much larger than these people. So he smuggles a lot of items through dhows or dhos, which are these ships that are sort of really specific to the Indian Ocean side, the Arabian seaside, and so dhows or dhos are sort of regarded to bring modernity into Oman and in the late 17th, 18th century. So these are ships that are built for that region, and these are ships also built for smuggling, and he uses them, and he gets and one of these ships called the Jalaram Viswas gets caught, and they say that they belong to Sukur Narayan Bhakhia. So that's going on one end. At another end, he sets up this elaborate scam of a crossword where he's laundering money for some of the biggest smugglers in the country. So it is a phenomenal book. And every time the people he would get caught, he would say, "I'm not the Sukur Narayan Bhakhia you're looking for. I have never seen a brick of gold in my life."
Mm.
So some of these stories are just beautiful.
I think that is what I find most interesting also when I read like any criminal story. I would like to, get to know the person, the criminal psychology behind it, that what made them actually, reach there. But of course, having said that, I have to ask, I have to start by asking you. So, my reference to prisons and jails is just Orange is the New Black, and I have Tihar Jail. That's all I've heard of. And now, of course, your book. But of course, you have written all these stories, so you must know so much more. So, I have to ask you, what do you think? What was the driving factor behind all these stories, and why did these people? Was it the problems that happened that were more than they could handle, or was it just the taste of freedom was so strong for them that they could not, just stay for the years that were intended? What do you think was the driving factor for these people that broke out of jail?
So sure, freedom is definitely one of them. But if you go through each chapter, each motivation is very, very different.
Mm,
Natwar Lal, I think, would just love to play with people,
mm,
while for Daniel Healy Walcott, it was to continue smuggling and evade the law. But if you go through to say the Burel jailbreak, it was something to that they needed freedom to continue the work of terrorism that they were undertaking.
mm,
Or Bitty Mohanty, who jumps bail, sort of vanishes into um, absolute anonymity. So he wants to save his life. So there are different motivations that are there. But what you do find, and in the introduction of the book, I try to even outline it, which is that there are specific steps that you can take to escape prison, and there is a certain pattern that you find. So the first is to find friends and accomplices, find a method, so to dig a tunnel and sneak into in those friends, uh, pay bribes, pick a Sunday of your choice. So all escapes happen on Sundays,
yes.
uh, and then just go for it. So there is definitely a pattern. There is definitely a way out. Someone um, someone like the someone like the psycho killer, like Psycho Shankar, was just he wanted to get out at all costs because he has this hunger, he has this need to kill. So, but the way he does it is he seeks help on the inside, and every escape sort of raises questions about the nature of prisons and what is happening in them. They're overcrowded, they're porous, and they're very, very, very they have breaking infrastructure. But that being said, the motivation to actually escape from prison is very low. So, in my research, as I was conducting the research, what I found was that prisons offer exceedingly fertile environments to actually grow your criminal gang. A lot of people don't feel motivated to leave. they get food, unko khana milta hai, they get a ready fodder of people that they can get. So even in the Mahato story, which is the one that involves the jailbreak in Nevada, you find that these guys actually build deep, long-lasting connections that carry out outside the prison. So it's very, very interesting.
Yes, exactly. That is what I was actually coming to next. That I've heard stories about how people not want to get out of because their life outside is actually more, deteriorating as compared to theirs, on the inside when there is a routine, there is, the food that they get regularly and all of that is fine. So that is very interesting. To some people, it's so routine and it's so alluring to be inside, but for some, it's just not possible. So
Yeah.
they find these holes. And coming to the research part that you did for this book, could you tell us a little bit about how you navigated through that? Was it just particularly reading about these stories, or just the jailbreaks, or also the crimes that they did and all of that? What did your research look like?
So when Rupa gave me the the offer, I definitely was scampering a little bit. But what I realized is that my methodology was to pick an escape of each type, where either people jump over walls, dig a tunnel, find a way to break out, make friends. So there were certain prerequisites that I did, that I sort of had in mind. The other one was to also find fantastical ones. So Sobraj was fantastic. Sukunarayan Bakhia's life was fantastic. His escape was fantastic. Walcott was flew out of the country in a plane. So there was a certain element of the fantastic to it. The when I sort of started researching, I spent a lot of time in the archives. I spent a lot of time talking to old cops. I also being a journalist helped. Secondly, is that you cannot do without a good editor. um, Writing is not a one person job, as it takes a village to bring up a child. It takes a lot of people to get a final good book done. Rupa was fantastic. We went back and forth. The feedback was great every time. It helped me structure, it helped me do it better. And then and so you research, you write iterations, you write versions, you make notes, you get stuck in the archive, you get stuck in conversations. Some of these stories were exceedingly draining, like the Psycho Shankar one, where you love the idea of academic research when it comes around criminality and criminology, but when you have to write about a serial killer and his sort of rapes and how he found his way into people's lives, and how he used to drive around, you get sort of sucked into someone's life, and it takes a little bit of time to even write about it. It's a sort of harrowing experience. I'd also like to thank my father. My father sort of sat patiently with me, went through, actually, my father and mother, my father first and then my mother. Both of them sort of were the eyes that sort of poured over this book in its initial forms. Then my editors at Rupa, and yeah, so that's it. So that was the process. That was writing, and yeah.
I think that's wonderful because clearly, if you are to write such contrasting and very interesting 16 stories and you're to go into it, you need people around you who can help you. That was actually my next question, that how come you decided to write so many stories when, all of them are so heavy, they have so much history, they have so many factors, instead of going through perhaps two or three. So how did you decide to write 16 of them? So was it
So
intentional, or were you just researching and you felt you had to
no,
sort of?
so an anthology is several stories.
Right,
So the
right.
format demanded it.
Okay.
I would have ideally done about 25, but as I said, that the motivation to escape prison is limited.
Right.
Um, I also sort of so writing is a long, arduous process, and I not going to lie, it takes time to get into it. So I delayed matters a little bit while writing, because you have to be in the right frame of mind. You have to sit down. You have to hope that it comes out. And when it doesn't, then you wait, and then it finally came out. So ideally, I would have liked to do a larger story, so maybe a sequel. Um, and then then when you look at these 16 stories, you realize that, as I said, there was a categorization process. As I said, there was a certain fantastical element that I did. There was also something that I wanted to stay true to my research past, and also try to string a history of India through it. So you will find different periods, you will find different settings, and you'll sort of gain a comprehensive idea about it.
Right, right. And from all of your experience as a crime reporter and as a author of a book about jailbreaks, do you think committing a crime as compared to the 1900s is easier now? Or is it difficult? Because, of course, we know for a fact that it's easier comparatively to catch people because now that we have DNA evidence and all of the technology, but then is it also easier to commit one because of the all the information available on the internet? And for example, you just told all of our viewers today that how they can break out of jail. So all that rampant information, do you think that makes it easier for a crime to be committed today?
That's an interesting question. The answer to this is not a simple yes or no. The answer is that crime is just not a one time, it's just not murder, it's just not theft. There are a variety of ways that you can break the law. And um, there are certain easier types of crime to commit, like maybe take unassuming people and take their digital identity and take money out of it, or like a jamtara, or because you might have crimes of passion, and there is no way. So it's always easy to commit a crime. You just have to do it. Like there is no way. Like tomorrow, I can go into my neighbor's house and steal things, and there is nothing that can stop me. But the sort of, it's not a question of how easy it is. It's a question of mentality and whether you can do it or not. So I constantly ask myself, would I be able to do what Sher Singh Rana did? Was kill Fulan Devi in the name of sort of historical injustice, or 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 someone else, or whatever. You need to be a very different type of person to a commit a crime, b not repent that crime, think that you belong outside, and then work and turn the cogs in the machinery of prisons to get out. So Sher Singh Rana was a very different type of person. He goes there. There are many theories that he's a gun for hire. He kills Fulan Devi, goes into prison, believes that he is meant for larger things, for a certain caste uh, crime. He picks that up, lives this sort of weird life where he goes to Dhaka, travels to Nepal, and ends up in Afghanistan, right? And brings back or allegedly brings back the remains of a Hindu Samrat, and is lauded in that community. But you need to be a very different type of person to do that. Or Natwarlal, in for over 50 years, conning people, from forging checks to telling people that something has to be done about something has to be done in terms of uh, posing as Andy Tewari's assistant and stealing watches or whatever. You need to be a very different type of person to commit these crimes in a way.
That's true. So I think mentality plays a way larger factor than whether it is easy or not. That's
Not
true.
only mentality, I think it's a specific, I would say an entrepreneurial zeal would also be seen
Um,
as a contributing factor to crime,
Again, that will
right?
depend on the kind of crime, right?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So, like,
Mm,
and this is something very interesting. So, the
right.
practices of Sukul Narayan Bhatia and Yusuf Pathan in the 70s and 80s in a license Raj
Mm,
would be completely legal today,
right.
with no law. We don't have a very rigid Kofe Posa, you don't have a license Raj in the same way. So an Ambani would be a criminal in the 70s and 80s.
That's true.
So
Mm.
it's also how you define a crime. It's also how crime changes over a period of time. Uh, Before the IPC and CRPC was brought in 1870 and 1871, or 1861 and 1871, you could have traveling mendicants or sadhus and sons who could bathe in the street,
Right.
right?
Right.
After IPC and CRPC gets imposed, that is illegal.
Correct. Yes.
So that's a crime.
So I think this is a very interesting topic, and I think that would require a whole other interaction.
Yeah. No, it's just one last thing. So my grandfather,
Yeah.
um, Bishan Kapoor, was when the independence struggle was happening, he was a criminal in Awadh, but he wasn't a criminal in Bharatpur. So so he would jump away into these into presidency states or princely states, and seek refuge. So there is history is littered with such characters.
Mm.
So it's fascinating.
Absolutely. I think a huge, huge topic, definitely. Abir, in India, it takes a very, very long time, sometimes 5 years, 10 years, 15 years for any criminal to be sentenced after committing the crime. And then, of course, we are aware that the criminals, then after they're caught, they make indigenous plans to break and escape, and knowing well that they can soon be caught. So, what, according to you, drives these criminals to commit murders, extortions, and so many other crimes again and again and yet again?
I just said that um, crime has many motivators, right? It could be a crime of passion, it could be a crime of need. So Geeta Parmar escaped prison. So Geeta Parmar's story is very, very interesting. Her husband is put into jail, and she needs to see him, but also needs to make a living for her young child. So she becomes a courier. So she takes mobile batteries to prisons and gives them. So that's an act of crime. So she starts getting used as a stooge. So necessity is one of them. Charles Sobraj is someone who needs that thrill. He's abandoned as a young child. He doesn't know what is happening. He finds himself spurned and sort of nationless. He doesn't have a passport. So he starts traveling and then he starts surviving. So Charles Sobraj is a crime of survival. Um, so in Burel, in the Burel jail escape, you see the crime being larger ideological. So there's the Khalistan movement, and you see Havra and all of these guys killing someone, a chief minister, and then desperately trying to get out to fight an to restart a movement. But also, what you find is that he's ordering pizza to the jail, right?
Mm.
So there are there are great motivators. If you look at Vitti Mohanty, he committed a rape because he misunderstood a signal, fell madly in love with a girl, and then did something absolutely horrific. And then he finds himself in prison, unable to comprehend how and why he reached here. And his father, allegedly, his father, who is a DGP level police officer in Odisha, allegedly again helps him get out. So there is crime is a motivator. I'm not sure that to commit a crime is a motivation. It is what leads you to do that. And there are crimes of passion. So I wrote this story in Scroll about Shamim Rahmani, who is this beautiful woman who was 21 years old, 22 years old, and allegedly shot dead her lover in a crime of passion. So there are great motivators.
Mm. That's true. And we know, of course, that you have also done game designing. So
Yes.
could you tell us a little bit about that journey of yours? and how it has parallel.
So, and okay, so games and stories are very similar. So my next plan is to turn this into a party game where the 16 people try to get out of a room, or it's an escape room.
Right.
So what better than using
Mhm.
actual stories of Prison Break
That'll be
to
interesting.
build escape rooms
Right.
for an audience? So that's one. So the moment I'm able to do this, if I explain it, you'll see the link between storytelling and game design. Games are essentially a way to tell a story where you just don't read it one way, or you're able to interact with it. So I'm not sure if you guys have seen the Netflix episode of Black Mirror called Bandersnatch. So if you haven't, please do. What
Mhm.
it does is, in that episode, you're able to make decisions in the way the story will pan out.
Right.
Okay.
So when actions happen, you're like, okay, should he go do this? Should he go do that? So whenever there's a decision tree built into your interaction with a story or a narrative, you are able to gamify that process. But what I like to do and what I do is I build systems. These are systems where you interact with an entire story as a whole, and you're allowed to determine that direction. So the game that I built, if you can see behind me, is called the Pole. And the Pole is an election board game which gives you a set of problems, gives you ways to solve it, and then you campaign. So it is an open system of sorts, and you can tell and build your own story into it. So for me, game design is a way to tell your own story, or tell a story where people can interact with their lives. So in a recent article again that I wrote in Scroll, um, where I say this line, that there is now an emerging necessity on the part of India to play their own story, which means that we need to start finding ways to play or build games that reflect Indian stories. So if you look at the popular games in India, it's Monopoly, it's Scotland Yard, it's so even
Ludo.
say sorry,
Ludo. Right.
Ludo's Indian, Ludo's Indian.
Right.
Scotland Yard, Monopoly. Now there's a huge wave of people playing Catan, but there are no games that are reflecting, say, the Mughals or a Desi crime syndicate
Mhm.
that have reached critical popularity. There are games, but there is an urgent need to build more games that communicate our lives to a large number of people. So that is what I'd like to do, and that's what I do.
That's very interesting, and I think that's an interesting way of educating while somebody is having fun. So they can learn about how it was and how it panned out and still enjoy. So I think that's very interesting. Just I think we have time for one more question. So just one last question. So you've of course been a game designer, a journalist, and now an author. So what out of the three have you enjoyed? Your role, or has it been, as you said, intermingled, or was
It
it
is one
something?
thing.
Right.
It is one thing. So right now, as Neeta ma'am had said, that it is I'm working on a graphic novel with a fantastic illustrator who's also done this illustration. His name is Ujan Datta. Um, what we are doing is we're trying to tell a very specific history of India, from about a gentleman who is fighting British rule and saving the temples and mosques and all of those. So when I look at the story, it fuses all three things. As a journalist, I am curious about how things have panned out. So, and as a researcher, I am curious about how things panned out in the past. So, in that ability to talk to people, go out there, meet people, understand how the world is and has been, is absolutely essential to me. The second thing, as a researcher and as someone who's sort of understanding the country and its scene, I'm understanding how we and how British rule has been and has impacted India. What I'm able to do through that is that I'm able to look at and use my game experience to build these stories of little challenges. So he jumps from here, he jumps from there, he goes there. What will happen here? What will happen there? Who does he encounter? What are the various options? What sort of points does he gain? What does he find? So games help me build that, right? Games have always helped me understand narrative storytelling, because if you so one of the biggest films of all time right now is Marvel's Endgame, right? Avengers Endgame. If the last sequence when they're throwing the gauntlet around, what is that? It's just American football. It's pass in the parcel, right? But if you're also able to distill that story into a simple, what is it? It is that five characters have to fulfill five different challenges to retrieve five different jewels in five different types of the of timelines and bring them back. So that's a game,
Right. Mm.
right? So using all parts of what I have done to do a few things is what I would like to do.
Interesting.
That's very interesting.
Very interesting, Abir. And I've already, I was talking about your last book. So the next book that you're writing. So will you tell us in brief what are you writing now? And then we
Yeah,
go over to the interactive round with the audience and also
yeah,
to the quiz questions. Yeah.
yes. So I am working on a graphic novel, as I said, with Ujan. It's called Zoraver and the Lost Gods.
Very
It's
interesting.
a graphic novel about a character called Zoraver who studies in Cambridge, comes back in the 1910s, comes back to Lucknow, and gets absorbed by a department of the British government and finds himself in a quagmire where he truly interacts with how rapacious the British Raj has been. And it is his and he finds himself caught in this exceedingly complicated scenario where he has to not only line his pockets but help out a lot of people. So that's all I'm at the liberty to say. But you can follow us on Instagram. There's only one chapter up, but fingers crossed we'll be signing to a publisher by the end of next week.
Lovely. All the best. And
Thank
I'm
you.
sure we'll also see you in our next author interaction with your new book. Definitely
Thank you so
in
much.
2020. Now,
Yeah.
Abir, we have a very interesting interactive round. We have a few people who have sent us their, they have been wanting to interact with you. Before that,
Absolutely.
Shreya, will you like to take one of the quiz questions so
Yes,
that
yes.
people can start replying and maybe one few of them will definitely win your autographed book today?
Oh
Yeah,
wow.
Shreya.
So I'll just be asking a question. If you know the answer, you can reply to me personally. And whoever answers first would be getting this book. So the first question is in 1986, a cat was found lying unconscious in the central jail in Delhi. It was a precursor to what would happen in the next few days. Who escaped?
Yeah.
Um, so
Got the
while you
answer?
reply, I think we can move on to the next question.
You
The next,
already have got the answer, Shreya?
yes, I have.
Okay. So, Shreya, we can begin with the interactive round and you can take the questions later on
Right.
as we go by. So, please unmute Mr. Pradeep Nagpal. He's a senior government, he's a retired officer and a senior government official from Telecom. Yes.
Hello, congratulations, Abeer.
Thank you so much.
Your very interesting book, The Most Notorious Jailbreakers. In all your books, all the 16 jailbreakers had excellent skills in planning, execution of crime, and subsequently escaping from the confinements of the jails. My question to you is, what was the common motive of these criminals? What did they want to achieve in their respective lives?
That's a very difficult question to answer because very much like the motivations between you and me vary, the motivations of all of the criminals vary. But I think the common underlying theme would be that it is a fight and break for freedom, that they're able to do what they wanted to do, from committing a crime to continuing to smuggle to do a variety of things. I think they just wanted freedom. And that's the underlying concept, that prisons can hold you down, but if you're thinking and you have the resources, then you'll find the way out and you'll get to do what you were doing.
Great, great, great.
Thank you, Mr. Nagpal. And
Thank you.
now, Divya Taneja, she's a homeopath doctor. She'd like to ask you a question. Divya, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
My question is that how do you see these jailbreaks as personal triumphs versus of the failure of the legal system or the social system in the community?
So I think the fact that they're in jail is the fact that the legal system did work, but a lot of them are, um, uh, they're kept in holding, they're in transit, but there's a specific word for it which is sort of missing in my mind right now. But in terms of when I see these escapes, I see them both as industriousness on the part of the person who wants to escape, and at all costs they want to do whatever they can. As I said, Sher Singh Rana uh, built an elaborate ruse where he trained a friend of his to dress up like a lawyer and then a cop, and then come and understand the layout of the prison. Or Natwar who bribed everyone, and even, I'm not going to give it away, but like he did something very, very fantastic in jails. Or Bitty Monty, who just found himself unable to deal with prison life, that he appealed, or allegedly appealed to his father. So jails are porous. There is no doubt about this. Jails are in many ways broken as systems. Central jails work better than district jails. So uh, in the jailbreak with the communists in Bihar, you see the entire city being stormed. So what can you do in such a moment? So it is that jails are overstuffed. They cross their capacity, but it is not so much a failure of the system as it is the ingeniousness of these people.
That's an interesting perspective. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Divya. Now we have Nisha. She's a homemaker and she's ex-Air India. Nisha.
I think you're muted. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm muted. Hi, Abeer.
Hi.
Hi, congratulations to you on the success of your book, The Most Notorious Jailbreakers.
Thank
But
you.
my question to you is regarding your election game, the poll, which is highly named. So, do you think that ideology plays an important role in winning of an election?
Yes, and no. Ideology is important in the way that everyone says that we're post ideology ever since the Soviet Union collapsed. But on the ground, elections, as you realize, so there's a nimble-footedness of political parties who can raise different issues at different times. You have centrist parties who do both. You have the left, which is an ideological party which believes in farmers, in labor rights, and then you have the right wing, which is more market oriented. And in our country, you see these articulated as the BJP and sort of left-leaning Congress, and then you see CPM, you see the socialists in the Janta Parivar parties. So there is an underlying ideology that formulates each political party, their manifesto and their poll plan. So ideology is central to how political parties even imagine themselves, but also more importantly, how we as an electorate find representation.
Yeah.
Because political parties have different ideologies, we are able to find ourselves across them. If there was only one ideology, like what happened in the Soviet Union, or what happens in America, or what happens in Belarusia, we find ourselves stifled. So I truly believe that the number of political parties that ascribe to a number of ideologies is very, very important. And the answer is yes, ideology is important because it finds the building block of a political party. So if for say the Bahujan Samaj Party, the BSP, you see that the historical deprivation plus what Ambedkar says plus dignity is very, very important. The same goes for the RJD, which is Lalu's party, social justice, which is tied to socialism, which is tied to sort of left-leaning politics. So it is essential.
Thank you so much. You explained it so well. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Shreya, please take the second question of the quiz.
Yeah. So the second question is, again, you can reply to me personally. This man was one of the biggest smugglers in Daman and Diu. He was called Ganpati. He was powerful and escaped by making friends with the jailer. Do you know who this is? I think this should be comparatively easier. Yeah,
That would
we've
be
got
interesting to answer.
yes, we got the answer.
You got the answer? Very
Yeah.
nice. Abeer, some people are really lucky. They're going to get your book.
Yeah.
So now we have Dia. She's a voracious reader. She would like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
I think I can ask one more question while we wait for her to turn on the video. So the third question is, no prison could hold him in a career of a crime that spanned 50 years. He escaped from every possible jail. His name is a Sobriquet. I think I'm pronouncing it wrong.
Sobriquet. Yeah.
Sobriquet.
I don't know how to even pronounce it.
Okay. And he once duped a police officer by giving him a suitcase filled with money, which suddenly caught fire. We got the answer before I could finish the question.
I think the first few lines were the giveaway
Yes.
straight away. So Rishika Batra, she's a biotechnologist and she's from NUS Singapore. She's a student there.
Just a minute. Hi, Abeer.
Hi, Rishika.
Hi. So I wanted to ask you, so you have done game designing and as well as you are an author and you are into writing. So both are very creative fields, yet they're very different. So how did you exactly, what inspired you to actually write about something? Like, because game designing, I saw your BBC coverage of the poll. So yeah, so how did you exactly go?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I said thank you. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So how did you exactly switch from game designing to writing? So I wanted to know about that.
So there was one thing that I did before that, which was that I was a journalist,
Oh,
and in that I wrote a lot,
okay.
and through that I found a lot of stories, and that's how I started writing. So I also wrote in college a lot, lots of assignments. You're in college, there's so much to write. There's constantly something to submit, so we're always writing. And that's how I ended up. And also the thing is that I was a kid who lived in his own world. There were always stories running around in my head, something to write, something to see, something. And also there is so much to watch on Netflix, and
Yeah.
I grew up on a steady diet of detective fiction, and that shaped the person I am. There are always something or another that I want to tell or something that I want to look at. So my computer's a mess. It's a nightmare. I have 4 different windows of um, Chrome open with multiple tabs on like one thought that I'm looking at or investigating. So it's yeah. So you need to be occupied by it.
Okay. Thank you.
We had
Thank you for the
one,
question.
sorry, I'm so sorry. So I was just saying we had one anonymous question, which was Was it hard for you to write about criminals while admiring them for their finesse and fearlessness? I think that's a very good question. How much do you like? Was it hard for you to write while you were trying to also praise them? And they're all criminals, we know.
That's a really good question. There's, of course, it was hard to write about criminals, but like, I think again, as you need to be a certain type of person to commit a crime, you need to be a certain type of person to appreciate a crime. And I am that sort of person. I have dossiers and folders filled with different types of crimes that I hope to write about at some point or another. I have lists of, maybe this was a cool murder. How can I write about it? There is an entire folder on my computer devoted to totemistic and superstition and supernatural crimes. So I guess that as you have to be a certain type of person to commit a crime, you have to be a certain type of person to write and appreciate a crime. So it wasn't very hard for me to write about the criminal because I was just like, wow, how did he do that? Or what happened next? Because there was a certain fascination with which how they were doing it. Thank you for
I
that
think,
question, though.
yes, that's a very interesting question. I feel that maybe since you've done so much research, maybe you can next write a fictitious book and develop a crime on your own and commit. You
So
can.
Zoraver is that.
Oh, Zoraver would
Yeah,
be totally
yeah,
fictitious.
yeah.
That's nice. I think that looks like a very obvious second step after this, after all the
Ye-
research.
Yeah. So yeah, I think so.
Yes.
It's a bit soon to say, but it's fun to build your own world, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Now I'm very curious to read that first chapter that you've uploaded. I think
Yes.
I can ask a fourth quiz question over here. So this was one of the most political of escapes. It was possibly linked to Rajiv Gandhi's murder. It was not just one escape, but several. Can you guess which infamous organization orchestrated an escape of 150 people in one go?
Got the
Yes,
answer?
we've got the answer.
Okay. Next, we have Shruti. Shruti is a chartered accountant and she would like to ask you a question.
Yes, I have unmuted you.
Hi, Abeer.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. One thing that I really love today. It's so much fun to be in this platform today with you because I just love to read fiction, thrillers, detective. And this pandemic has been awesome because I've fed myself with all the Netflix thrillers and documentaries all over. So when Neeta told me the premise of the book, I was like, I don't know, I have to be there. And so much fun to, it's like real stuff that you've dealt with. But what I felt when I read or watch such stuff, it like plays on my psyche. I get affected. So when you have been into the thick and thin and gone through so much of research, how have you handled at this age? Because you have been a journalist, I understand, but probably when you started, was it that easy to be not affected?
So it just comes back to what I just said 2 minutes ago. Um, as I just said, that you have to be a specific type of person to commit a crime. You have to be a specific type of person to enjoy the morbidity of it. For me, crime is just not a singular moment. It is uh, a historical process. It is a social process. It is a cultural process. No part of a crime can be seen in isolation. And that's what excites me about it. That even something as horrific as and I constantly say the title of the chapter in my book, sort of even in exasperation as the book also comes to a close, and it was like psycho killer, thank God he is dead. Because at some point, as writing that chapter, I just wanted this gentleman to die, and he did. But even from a psychosocial perspective, to see this man so hungry to commit a crime, to commit a rape, to travel around the countryside. So I'm not sure if you guys have seen this TV show called Mindhunter. So it just felt like an articulation of that television show when it came to Psycho Killer, because he was a serial killer. He did drive around and scope out a crime. He did find unassuming women. He did have a pattern. He did have all of this, and you find that he's locked in prison and he just wants to get out. So even the fact that I still talk about him so much, there was a certain impact that he had on my psyche. And as I sort of talk and relive writing that book, it triggers a certain emotion. So of course, I don't emerge unscathed from writing about devious, mentally ill people, but I still say that there was a level of fascination that drove me to continue writing, because I didn't see them purely as the scum of society. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to go into a little bit of theory, but so E.P. Thompson and and a bunch of Indian scholars also say that a crime is cultural, so you cannot see it in isolation. And the second thing is that it is interface and interaction between the oppressors and the oppressed. So it's banditry, for example, is a very, very interesting crime where a certain type of social class interfaces with another. So it's social banditry. So I find it to be very, very interesting in that light. So thank you for that question.
Just a small thing before I end, Abhi, I just want to understand, you've been, saying again and again that our Indian jails are very porous, right? And it's written all over and it's very spoken very openly. Do you think all these things are going to help them to change at any point of time? Do we see anything changing in our system there? Or do you think it has changed over the years? Has it become a little more
Uh,
better? And
so yes, the jails, every time there's an escape, there is a beefing up of security. So I don't know if you know, but outside Tihar, you have to. Tihar is manned by Tamil Nadu Special Police Force because they cannot speak Hindi, so there is no way that you can bribe them into doing that.
okay.
But the thing is that I'm not sure, right? Like I'm sort of ideologically different. I believe in open prisons. I believe in spaces that you should look at reforming rather than sort of incarceration. So I feel that criminal justice and the justice system needs some sort of re-looking at, and the carceral aspect of it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether the tightening of the screws on people who are already cut off from society is the right answer.
Thank you, Abhi. Wonderful speaking to you, and all the best for your future projects too.
Thank you so much.
We have, I think, two more questions. Let's just ask two more. Is Chanchal who would want to ask you a question.
Hi, Chanchal.
Uh, Hi, Abeer. It is such an intriguing experience to be speaking to an author. I am honestly not a very, person who reads a lot of crime stories. But recently, my daughter has developed this interest in playing games like Cluedo and Scotland Yard. So, she
Yeah.
keeps me engaged in these. So, listening to your conversation also, somehow it could help me connect to those. So my question for you is that, students these days do not find writing, very interesting. I mean, they don't want to express themselves that well, or probably reading also, I would say. They are far more interested in watching these stories on Netflix, or rather, they want to spend their time watching video games and other things. So what advice would you give to these students, or maybe to us as parents? And we might be having few teachers also here joining us. So how can we encourage them to write, so that they also become a budding author in future, so that we have more authors like you, and how to hone their reading skills also?
So there is no single answer to this, but while you're telling me this, there's only one poem that comes to my head,
Mhm.
and you must read it if you haven't, and you must put it up somewhere. I remember, and when I was young, my parents did put it up on the wall in our room that my sister and I shared. It was called Television by Roald Dahl.
Okay.
So reading is a culture, right? My school, I was very lucky, brought it in. We used to do something called Dear in our school, which is called Drop
Drop
Everything and
everything and
Read.
read. Yes, yes.
So every day mandated we would have 10 minutes or 15 minutes of reading a book.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, reading is a cultural thing as much as you say it is also tied to your home environment. I was very lucky to have a house filled with books. We have more books than we have space, and they're just falling and spilling all over the place. So you need to enforce certain amount of with certain strictness that you as a parent must read. You must also stay away from your device. Create a very visual and physical manifestation of reading. That you yourself are holding a book on the sofa and your kid will automatically ask you with curiosity, kya padh rahe ho aap? So the
Right.
onus of reading also lies because growing up, I would say my sister was reading a book all the time. And as an elder sibling who read so much, I always wanted to be like her. So I was always picking up the same books that she was reading, and then I would get scolded. But then but that built up like a reading culture for me. So if there is someone in your family who is reading, your child will read. Some of my closest friends, their parents read so much, so they read. So the question is that when was the last time you read a book,
Mhm.
cover to
Mm-hmm.
cover?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so the expectation from your child to read is the same as the expectation from you to read.
Right, right. Totally agree with you, Abir. But here I also would like to add that as a teacher, we can only encourage our students to read. We cannot further go and encourage the parents also to read. I mean,
No, I am saying that. So my school was absolutely. So that's what I'm saying. So this is
yes,
perhaps the
yes.
cultural aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
The, as a teacher in school, you can mandate, dear. We were given book reports to write. There is a way that you can convince your parents to the parents in a school to read. You can tell
Mm-hmm.
them on PTAs that your child is not reading. The second thing is that this over obsession with marks will automatically dismiss activities that are not seen as something that will help you get marks. So maybe engaging with fiction is something that people will be like, "You pad rahe ho aap?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? What will you get out of it? So I think the problem is systemic, and we also, as a society, as a people, are not taught how to write well. It has been the struggle and the bane of my life to write well, and I'm not sure if I am able to now, but sangharsh chalta rahega. So it is deeply complex. But I would say that if you want your child to read, read yourself too. Create a space where they're reading and where you are reading, and you encourage them to interact with you reading. Is my
Thank you. Yeah, that's a nice one. I think we are
Yeah,
running short
thank
of
you so
time.
much. Thank you so much, Abir.
Thank you, Chanchal. We have one last question and one last quiz question. And please stay till the end of that because we are going to also declare the winners. Uh, Let us take Dia. That'll be a small question, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, what was the most interesting thing that you learned as you were writing the book?
how to write a book.
That's very nice.
Patience and how to write a book. You can write short essays, but like writing a 40,000 word or 50,000
Exactly.
word book is a different Herculean and almost Sisyphean task. So, what did I learn from writing? I learned how to write a book.
Did
Lovely.
you, before starting, did you have like a set number of pages that you had to achieve?
No,
Hmm. Okay.
Great.
So
Lovely answer.
yeah.
Shreya, the last
I think
question.
there were a few more questions in the chat. I'm so sorry if I've missed. There were quite a few actually. There's somebody who was asking that would you want to in the future delve into spiritual aspects of a criminal mind?
No.
No.
He
Okay.
was quite straightforward in that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think you're more interested in how the crime happened and why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Than
Anything but spiritual. Yeah.
right. One last question. Somebody wanted to ask you if you would in the future consider writing in detail about each jailbreak.
Oh, I would love that. Yamini from Rupa has left, so if you guys like that, please write to her, and or I will tell her, and I would love to. I would like to explore a lot of these stories into full-blown novels because each of them deserves like a tome in itself. But right now, yeah, it's great.
We look forward to that. We look
Yeah.
forward to a detailed. So, 1 second. So I'll just announce the 5 winners. So first we have Divya Taneja, who also I would like to mention she's answered all the questions, and I think 3 or 4 of them. So I can't give you the book 3 times, but so one of them would be yours, Divya Taneja. Then we have Shreya Malhotra, who's answered, Shruti, Diya Neja, and one more we have, which was Pradeep Nagpal, in which Divya Taneja had answered before, but I can't give the book again. So congratulations to everyone.
Really, congratulations to everyone who's got this book. This is a lovely book, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And Abeer, you have to sign the book, please,
I
because
will.
yeah,
I will.
that is what people will really treasure. And
Thank you
Abeer,
so much.
thank you for taking out so much of your valuable time. I know you're busy writing, and you're busy into you're really neck deep into your second book, and you're also making that game. It was wonderful having you. It was such a pleasure to have a young mind on our platform who's doing incredibly well. And thank you and all the
Thank you
best for
so
your
much.
second book. Anything you'd like to say to the viewers? Anything that we missed
Thank you.
out?
Thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening to me. It's been fascinating, and I hope that I find my way back onto this platform soon with my next book,
Yes.
and we're able to again tell you something else that we've been doing. So thank you so much, Neeta. Thank you so much, Shreya. Thank you so much for having me, um, and thank you, Chanchal, Shruti, Dia, Divya, and everyone who asked me questions. It helps me articulate what I am doing and how I've been thinking. So thank you so much.
Lovely.
Thank you so much for
Thanks
joining.
to all the participants and thanks to all our viewers who keep on coming back on this forum. And see you on 10th November with the most fearless columnist, Tavleen Singh, with her book, Messiah Modi. So we'll all look forward to that. And thank you,
Just
everyone.
before we sign off, I would just like to mention that this session, the recording of this session will also be available on our YouTube channel. So we'll be sharing that on our Instagram. So you can follow us there and check definitely and, share perhaps with someone that you enjoyed the session. So thank you so much for everyone joining in and thank you so much for coming.
Happy reading,
have a great
all
time.
of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you. Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.